the general topic of genocide, but then we will also, in the last part of the class, focus on the Holocaust. Those of you who are social majors, the course is offered and available for concentration credit. You can take it to fulfill the transnational requirement in sociology. For others of you who might be interested in taking the class, it is also an upper division elective, so you can use it towards your 40 units in sociology. Hope to see some of you in the fall. You've gotten started on this road of exploration, and the class is the way for you to continue that exploration if you're interested. For those of you who are graduating, we're really going to miss you. Are you going to miss us? No? We're going to miss you. We want to remind you that the White Rose is being shown tonight at 7 o'clock in Stevenson 3030, and if you remember, the White Rose was an organization of students who resisted the Nazis. They've already graduated. They're just sitting over there just having a grand old time. We've been most impressed by how well people have comported themselves so far. Our guest lecturer today is Sami Rifati. He is the president, I believe, of the Voice of Roma and the founder. He's here to talk to us about yet another genocide that's going to take us in your pantheon of things that you're learning about, and that is the genocide in Kosovo. Another genocide that took place well after the Holocaust. And another reminder that people did not work to prevent never again after the end of the war. I'm sure that many of you have read about Kosovo in Samantha Power's book. And if not, this probably, hopefully, will spark you to try and understand what went on there. There was a reading posted to eReserves about the experience of a group that was referred to at that time as the Gypsies during the Holocaust, and hopefully you will take the time to read it. It's very short. One would hope that you might have done it beforehand. So it's my honor to present to you Sami Rifati, who has a great deal of information to share with you.
Thank you, Mina. It's really an honor to have all you here, and my name is Shani Rifati, and I am a Rom from Kosovo. I came in California in 1993, being myself ignorant about my own culture prior to get into this, my activism. So, just after being here 3-4 years with my partner, Carol, I started to get into my culture, to study my own culture, because coming from former Yugoslavia, from Kosovo, I deal very good about my own heritage, because all the time the civilized world or any country in the world that has a Romani population make us always believe, I'm intentionally quoting the belief, that I'm not worth it of life, I'm dirty, or something is wrong with my people and with myself. Well, after all these years, I started to think, which is a big difference in between belief and thinking. And till today's day, I am working very hard to think about, not just about the Romani culture and the oppression, but also the world's affairs, because right now we are living in very scary times where, again, another quote, anybody different who deviates from the mainstream society, it's more or less a threat to the homeland security. And at the pace we're going right now, it's pretty scary. And unfortunately, I see all of you are here. It's wonderful to have these young students here and to see what we grown-ups are offering to you, what a role model we have to give to you. And it is pretty meager, pathetic, and scary. There are also, I would have to acknowledge also some incredible workers who are working on the human rights and education, who really do work very hard to present the global affairs in a truthful way. Because today we are living in the era of the high-tech communication that really is pretty scary. And one of the great things being here in America, actually, more or less I got my political science through, I would say definitely through my partner Carol and KPFA. And it is a very hard work because, as you all know, the CNN and NBC and all the conglomerates are doing a great job to make people believe. So, and one of my advice to you is don't get glued, don't get stuck into the TV screens, because the more you watch, less you're going to know. Today I'll be talking about the history of the Romani people, known as Gypsies. And then I'll be talking about a fictionalized gypsy and the treatment of the Roma from the moment when they appeared to the Western Europe and Eastern Europe. I'll be talking about Porraimos, which is the Romani Holocaust. And I'll be talking about Kosovo, the treatment of the Roma aftermath of the, quotes again, humanitarian bombing. And I'll be talking about the Western Europe, especially after the US/NATO interventions. So originally Roma do come from India, northwestern region, Punjab. And most of the people did not know all the way up to 18th, even mid-18th century, where do Roma come? And now, these are all speculation regarding the Romani culture. And one of the reasons why is all this so unknown and debatable is because Romani people, in general, they carry their traditions orally. And again, another speculation, as I mentioned, it is some of the scholars are saying that they fled East India somewhere around 9th century or 10th century. And the reason is, again, unknown. So when Roma moved from India, they crossed through Persian Gulf and went through Egypt, and then they spread from Egypt in many other directions, but majority of them came to Europe. Now, this is a crucial point where the term where is deriving from. It is, again, the misconception of the Europeans, because these dark-skinned people who fled from Egypt and now suddenly in Europe, they thought that they are from Egypt, which is false. In Latin language, Gypsian is the person who comes from Egypt. So from Gypsian derives the word gypsy. And just to give you another clue, from gypsy derives another word, which probably most of you heard. It just, that shows how much people know little and how sometimes people are ignorant about so-called gypsies. Anybody heard the term, I got gypped? Okay. It's kind of very similar also to the, you heard the Jewish slang also, we're going to Jew the price down. Again, people's ignorance is really pretty scary sometimes. You know, once when you are ignorant, then the first thing what comes to your mind is fear. And then once when you are frightened, human do tend to hurt each other. And I'll try also to connect some of the parallels in between two cultures, in between Roma and the Jews. Hopefully, if I remember later on my speech, I'll mention that. So when for the first time in Europe, Europeans were not so kind to us. And most of the time, we were forced to be nomadic, which is another parallel with the Jews. Also, the Jews used to be nomadic. And unfortunately today, nomadism doesn't exist because of the borders and the documentation and all the... But however, when Roma appeared to Europe, they were literally forced to go from one country into another. And most of the time, we were denied the access to the mainstream society. And when you treat people like that, then we, Roma, as a parents, are not so eager to send our children to go to take education for the very same society who is abusing us tremendously. And then, again, another misconception of the predominant culture is you heard the term, the gypsies are also uneducated too. And, you know, to your surprise, sometimes, you know, when I go to give lectures in various public gatherings or universities, and especially there are times this cultural event, you know, when they promote the music of the Roma, such as Gypsy Kings, Gypsy Queen, Gypsy Caravan, Gypsy this, Gypsy that. And people are all shocked that I did not appear with my costume. So, and this tells really to me as a scholar and activist how people little know about the Romani culture. Now, Roma somehow managed to come through Spain, which in Spain they call us Gitano, which is another misnomer. And through Spain they spread eastward and westward in Europe. And in Europe, there is one of the largest concentration of the Romani population, especially in Romania. There are up close to 3 million Romani population in Romania, which I hope I'm going to touch also that subject to distinguish in between Rom, Romania, and Roma and Romani, to understand the terms. So in Romania, Roma were enslaved for 500 years. In Romanian language, some of you probably also heard in the Slavic languages, they call us Țigan. In Romanian language, Țigan means slave. And so, and unfortunately, almost nothing different were in the rest of the European countries. The treatment of the predominant culture was not so kind to Romani population. And now, how did come this fictionalized image of the Roma, is the question. Well, to begin with, Roma, as I mentioned earlier, we do carry our tradition orally. And most of the time, our history has been written by the outsider, which is Gajo, non-Romani person. And especially nowadays, you have TVs and newspaper and radios who just do all kind of things what they want to do, and without any repercussion, actually. And this is really interesting, where whenever there is some kind of politically not correct, you know, people are very aware, especially in California, about correctness. You know, people are very careful when they state something maybe stereotypical about, sorry to take this example, maybe African Americans, you know. People are very careful. Or if you have some snide remarks about other oppressed group of people, people are very conscious. But when you talk about the gypsies, there is not a single repercussion. Really, nobody cares, more or less. Because the fiction, the fantasy is more important here, especially in the United States of America, than the reality. Because we still want to live in our fantasy. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to this cultural event with especially belly dancers and the musicians and the artists. They just love gypsies. And for them, it's like another opportunity to dress up their gypsy costume beside the Halloween party. And if you see any venue all over the places, even in Western Europe, and what is the best selling thing is you just bring gypsy kings and gypsy queens, and the halls are packed. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, really, it's very interesting. I do have a performer who is known as the queen of the Romani music. And I am approaching the venue. I say, what, you know, oh, we cannot do this. I said, well, what is your function as a venue here, as a hall? Well, we do educational programs. Exactly, if you're gonna bring people, then you are really stealing the money from people. You are misinformed them. These are Roma, but we won't sell the tickets then. This is one of the examples that I'm bringing to you, just to see how hard it is to bring the authentic musicians and to the hype of the fictionalized gypsy. You know, we were not eagerly going to read the crystal balls and the tarot. We did not have opportunity to get other occupation. So we had to find a way how to survive and how to fit in the mainstream society. It was not our choice that we went to read you your fortune. So this fictionalized image is more or less is crippling us even today. And just having those ideas about culture, completely distorted ideas, when we come ultimately to the Second World War, that we call the Baroporaimos, which means big endeavoring. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that exactly. Poraimos means big endeavoring, or something horrible happened to you. It could also be referred as a horror. And especially in the older generation of Roma, when we mention the Poraimos, it somehow, to them, it seems like it is a forbidden word. They don't want even to mention that horrible word. And what happened to us and to Jews and to many other groups as a part of the final solution, it was a horrible thing. And one of the interesting points of the solution, the only two group of people targeted on the basis of race were Jews and Roma. And historically, if you go to the German laws, even on 18th century, there were zillions of books that were kind of very anti-Gypsyism, having all the law imposed on Roma, even way before the Nazi rise in 1933, when Hitler came to power. One of the examples, for example, in the German emperor in 1721, was saying that Roma do not deserve to be mixed with the German blood. We are talking about 1721. So with this kind of idea, when Hitler came to power, just 4 months after, he imposed more or less the same laws to Roma and to Jews. And then there was another German law in 1933 where they stated that Roma were considered as outsiders and they don't know how to live a civilized life. They should be kicked out at all costs from the German territory. Another example is around 1890, there was a conference on the Gypsy scum. It was held in Swabia, where they gave to the military the authority to completely clean up the Swabia region from the gypsies. So, one of the interesting points that I want to mention here about the one of my colleague, scholar Ian Hancock, He worked really tirelessly in order to educate general public about the Romani Holocaust. And this is a really very hairy issue because there are so many implications about reparation, especially in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Some of the high top board members in the Holocaust Museum are working very hard really to deny that even Romani Holocaust it existed. And you know, I am married to a Jewish American, and I constantly run into some of her relatives that were Holocaust survivors. And they were telling those older people that they do remember the Zigeuner night. There were Roma, too, part of the final solution. But also in the same time, there were also some incredible Jewish scholars who were very much supportive of the work of the Professor Ian. More or less thanks to those also Jewish scholars such as Merrill Civil, who worked tirelessly with Ian Hancock to convene to some of the Jewish scholars that the Roma were the part of the final solution. But however, it took the Ian Hancock 12 years to convene even to the State Department that we should have one Rome representative to represent the Holocaust Center in Washington Museum. And now with this new administration, with George II, those funds are cut now. Right now, we don't have any position, any chair on to represent the Romani victims at the Holocaust Museum. So during that period, I'm going also to mention some of the stories of my uncles who did resist the fascism. And in Kosovo, in 41 through 45, the Germans did not actually arrive in Kosovo. The Kosovo region was controlled by the Mussolini's forces, El Duce, and along their side were working the Albanian fascist collaborators. And they were rounding up more or less all the Jewish neighborhoods and the Romani neighborhoods. But given now one of the interesting things why Roma were spared in Kosovo was because Roma were a big labor force in Kosovo region, especially around the mines. And Kosovo region rich with minerals. And most of Roma were spared in Kosovo region. And majority, almost all of the Jews, they fled Kosovo. So one of the reasons why Roma, again, were expelled, because it was because of the economics. If they were ethnically cleansed, all population, Jews and Roma, there would be nobody left to work on the mines. And so Roma at that point were saved by a developer there that were in Kosovo. But also, big number of Roma did join the resistance, the partisans, and they fought against the fascism. One of the stories that my mother told me, she was 11 years only old, that there was in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, a Jewish neighborhood, and literally entire neighborhood with the shops were completely destroyed by the Italians and the Albanian fascists. And my mother was 11 years old, and at that period, it was a big depression. There was nothing barely to eat. And she ran to the shop, and there was some candies lying on the food, on the ground. And she reached down to grab the candies and ran away. While she was on the ground, the fascists just came and kicked her with her boot in the mouth, and she was kind of all in blood. Which, this story I have not heard till year 2000, when my mother was here. And it was really very hard for her to this incident. So, again, the fate of Roma and Jews went more or less hand by hand. And if we even go historically, actually the first ever genocide to happen to Roma, on the final solution, it happened in 1940, when 250 Romani children was tested to test the Cyclone B for the gas later on that was used on the gas chambers. And now, as I mentioned in the beginning, everything, when we are talking about the Romani history and the world events that happen, everything is so debatable. Now, there is a huge debate amongst the Jewish and Romani scholars. How many Roma were the victims of the final solution? And the number varies from, according to the Romani scholars, from 500,000 to 1.5. And for example, Mr. David Baum, who wrote a book about genocide, according to his figures, there were somewhere around 20 to 25,000. So now, again, it's very difficult to figure out because whenever Roma happen to be in any part of the country, we do not have country. We do not run the census. And many Roma, till today, are not willing to come out of the closet because of this fear of discrimination and persecution. You won't believe how many cousins, relatives I have. I would say at least 24, at least, if not even more, married in the mixed marriages with Germans in Switzerland, French, Italians. They do not dare to come out to tell to their spouses that they are Roma. They don't dare even to tell to their children. I mean, can you imagine living with such a horror in your life? And most of the time when I go to visit, almost every summer to Europe, and I meet my relatives and my cousins, and I explain to them that this is not okay. But we are living with now also it is not easy too. I understand that because I used to do that too for a long time. So now after all these years, it is hard for me to imagine to live with someone, to share everything from my life and to hide something from the loved ones that I really respect and love dearly. And now you can imagine what it means to live with someone that you deeply care and not telling them the whole truth. You know, it's pretty heavy stuff. As a matter of fact, I just received today one phone call from Germany, from a wonderful young lady who is my family friend. She has 4 to 5 uncles that are in a mixed marriages, aunts and uncles. And she was telling me that she really is having hard time being in between two worlds. And also, since the unification of Europe, right now the situation of Roma did worsen enormously. Before I go to Europe, I mentioned that I would touch the basis on the terminology. Rom, R-O-M, in a Romani language, it is human being or person, and it is singular. Rom, R-O-M. Roma, R-O-M-A, it's plural. Romani is such as Romani language, Romani history, Romani culture, and it has to do nothing with roaming, nothing has to do with Rome from Italy, and nothing has to do with Romania. So, and the language is more or less up to 70% from the Sanskrit, from the Hindi. And Roma do have a language, it's called Romani. And it is based literally from many other, it's a component. The rest of the 30, maybe up to 40% is the component of, it depends where Roma ends. For example, if I ended in Kosovo, I would combine Romani language with Serbian, or maybe with a little bit Turkish, or with a little bit Macedonian or Bulgarian, and so on. Or for example, if Rome ends in, Rome person ends in Italy, of course, they're going to mix the language, Romani language, with Italian. And also religion, more or less the religion is imposed on Roma. For example, I'm from Kosovo again. My ancestors are practicing Muslim religion. And for example, if Rome ends in, people ends in Italy, they would be Catholics, of course. Now, I'm going to touch the little bit the Romani situation in Eastern Europe since the collapse of the communism. Well, the situation is very devastating. All these new members of the European Union, such as Czech Republic and Slovakia and Slovenia, and I think Croatia just entered. But more southeast you go in Europe, the treatment of Roma is worse and worse. And if you stop in Kosovo, it's, again, I cannot call it genocide, but ethnic cleansing for sure. And I call that more as an ethnocide. It's the combination of the genocide and ethnic cleansing. The only thing what is missing in Kosovo is really just more or less the gas chambers. So since the collapse of the Russia, a lot of these Eastern European countries suddenly saw such an enormous freedom imported, literally, by the US and other Western powers. And just to give an example, Bulgaria is very strong in the tobacco industry. And just recently they sold the tobacco industry to Philip Morris. And now when you convert the state assets, the socialistic system, into the private system, who gained the most? Of course, the people who bring us the freedom and the civil society and free market and fair trade. So the Philip Morris, immediately the first thing what they did, they modernized the fabric. They brought the machines. They don't need any more labor, physical labor. And guess who are the first one to lose the job? The dark-skinned people. Another example, the Prime Minister of Czech Republic, the Mr. Havel, or Shavel, they came with a new educational programs for the minorities. And guess what are those educational programs for the Roma? The Romani children are not competent to take the state tests. So they put them with students that are mentally disabled for the Romani children, regular, healthy Romani child, ready to go to school. And they are not allowed to go to school because they are considered as mentally challenged. Since the collapse of the communism in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, more or less you have, if not every day, but at least every second day, the skinheads attack on the Romani people. And according to one of the newspapers in the Czech Republic, a daily newspaper, they said that the Interior Ministry is connected with the skinheads, more or less like up to 90%, and the military up to 60%. So, in Western Europe, the situation of Roma is, again, really terrible. Since the breakup of former Yugoslavia, there are thousands of Roma seeking political asylum. And now the Western European countries are having a special squads that they go in the middle of the night, literally kidnap the entire family of the refugees, and they put them back to the airplanes, and they bring them back where they can, which is literally more or less in the same region in Kosovo that is still in peril. Most of the Roma that are living there in Western Europe, we are talking about Germany, Italy, Switzerland, France, Finland, Netherlands, they receive a temporary status every 2 to 3 months. And after 10 years of sanctions in Kosovo, after decades of ethnic fighting in between Serbs and Albanians, and Roma are caught in the middle, and then 10 years of sanctions imposed by IMF and World Banks, and then 78 days of bombing, and then you had just to pick up for what you can for a few minutes from the home and bring all your family and flee to Western Europe. And now you have to fear for 2 months whether if they're going to approve your stay or being deported. And now, once when you are on that program as a temporary status in Western Europe, you are not entitled to work, you are not entitled to study. You do receive some aid from the government, but it's so meager that you barely can go through the month. And again, since the unification of Western Europe, the rise of the skinheads and the mobs, it's becoming, nowadays in Europe, Western Europe, it's kind of really very racist society. And the hatred is kind of now, right now, it's really universal. Whenever I go to Germany every summer to visit my mother, I'm having really hard time with the German people. And it's really maybe not fair. I am not trying to label everybody are same or last year we went to the train station and we were trying to have a family reunification. The refugee family who lives in Germany in one town and to go in another town in Germany, and it is a high season ticket, it's summer, and we are on the trying to buy tickets for large family. And it is not pleasant to be there, really, just the attitude. Even just when I go with my wife, who has red hair, a beautiful, gorgeous American lady, and when we hold hands, you won't believe how much dirty look we get whenever we happen to be. Sometimes we are maybe in France or in Italy or in Germany. It's becoming really, Europe is becoming very scary place in the same time. The bureaucracy, it's so difficult. And most of the refugees that are in Western Europe, they don't know how to speak well the language. They do not have political representatives to lobby on their behalf. And it's very difficult just to be there and doing nothing. You cannot work, you cannot study. The medical is like almost denied to you, any healthcare. And really, unfortunately, I'm bringing you all this bad news. And that's what's happening with the culture who more or less never see war in our existence. We never did start any political conflict or ethnic cleansing. And look what price we are paying as people. And I was going to show you some of the images from our book, but I think I'm going to leave a little bit room for you to ask some questions. And one of my conclusions would be, again, it is hard to see. I cannot just simply believe that there is not a single international body in the world to stop any genocide or ethnic cleansing. It is very scary, you know. And being now in this humanitarian distribution and advocacy and doing all this work, I know one thing: whenever United States or the United Nations went to intervene, there was always a disaster. And I know, to your surprise, you're going to say, what is he talking about? Well, let me put it this way. After 78 days of bombing of Kosovo, which American media called it humanitarian bombing. Can you imagine that? You bomb the country, you destroy the infrastructure, and then you call it humanitarian bombing? Do you guys speak English sometimes, you know? We even kill our soldiers and we call them, oops, friendly fire. You know, I'm tired of this. That's why you gotta be really careful how you read those newspapers. These are the words from the persons that they call as collateral damage. Okay? Whenever they brought these wonderful words, such as civil society, tolerance, what, you cannot tolerate my behavior? Whoever brings those words to you, you ought to distrust to those people, seriously. Because those people are getting thousands of dollars salary. That is not humanitarianism, I'm sorry, folks. That's capitalism at its best. United Nations administrator in Kosovo gets thousands of dollars. And since they arrived with soldiers, 120,000 Roma were ethnically cleansed by the extremist Albanians and Kosovo Liberation Army. That's why I say it doesn't work. There is not an international body who could stop the genocide. Do you remember the Rwanda genocide? You do?
Yes.
Where was the Madeleine Albright to stop that genocide? She knew that is going to happen, that. Where was he was the undersecretary, he was the head figure on that region. Everybody knew that is going to happen. The genocide, they could not stop it again. Red Cross came to Kosovo. You know what they did? They were smuggling the weapons to the Kosovo Liberation Army. Because when you have the Unions, or Red Cross, or Doctors Without the Borders, supplying the weapons to the Kosovo Liberation Army, and the Kosovo Liberation Army, according to the State Department, is a terrorist organization. And now we are going to do the humanitarian work? 5 years later in Kosovo, since the United Nations and US soldiers came to Kosovo, I, as a dark skin, I cannot move freely in my hometown, in Pristina, in Kosovo, because of my dark skin. Albanians are going to kill me. Parents don't work in Kosovo. Children don't go to school. Freedom of movement is limited. You have literally on a daily basis, the hand grenades are thrown into Romani homes. Kosovo region is ethnically cleansed, ethnic Albanians. 250,000 minorities were ethnically cleansed in presence of the United Nations, up to 400 so-called non-governmental organizations, and up to 50,000 peacekeepers. Now, you remember, if the scope of the humanitarian bombing was to stop the ethnic cleansing, to stop the new Hitler, which was Mr. Milosevic, remember that? All those wonderful lines from the Democrat liberals? You remember? Yeah. If the scope was to stop the ethnic cleansing, then how come in front of their own eyes happens one of the biggest ethnic cleansing ever in the conflict of former Yugoslavia? Again, since the West came to bring this civil society, liberation to us, we Roma are still suffering, and many other ethnic groups in former Yugoslavia. And again, there is not a single international body who could really stop the ethnic cleansing. People, this is very, really, really scary. It frightens me. So I think I'm going to stop there and then take maybe some questions. I would mention a few things before I forget, because I forgot the flyers. We are having our 8th annual festival. I mentioned about Professor Ian Hancock. He's going to be coming to event that is going to happen in Sebastopol Community Center. Sebastopol Community Center, May 7th. The street is 390 Morris Street. That's May 7th. And then next day, on Saturday 8th, is our outdoor all-day festival with the traditional food and meal and handcrafts and wonderful music from Balkan region with some flamenco music and music from Greece, Turkey, and Belarus. So if you want more information about our work, please visit our website, www.voiceofroma.com. Question? Please. Elka, go.
What does the name Sinti mean?
Thank you. The question was, what mean Sinti? That is, Roma do have different group of, I would say, subgroups of people. And it depends in what region you are. For example, Sinti, if you mention to me Sinti or to any Rom, we know that they are Roma, origin of Roma, but they live in Western Europe, especially around the area of Germany, Italy, Switzerland. And unfortunately, I don't know what means Sinti. So, and there's some other group of Roma, such as in Great Britain, they call us travelers. Or in Spain, they call themselves Caló, which means black. Then there are hundreds of other subgroups, which most likely I would lose you there. And then in Great Britain, there is another group of Roma that are self-Romanichel, from the Celts, Romanichel. So.
Spell or repeat the Roma name for the tragedy that befell the Roma during the Holocaust?
Baro, B-A-R-O, Porramos, P-O-R-R-A-M-O-S. And it means big endeavoring, or horror, or rape. Horror or rape. And you can find all of this information in our website too.
Can you say the website one more time?
voiceofroma.com, www. It's all together, small letters. Barbara.
Could you speak just a little bit about what's going on right now? Because I've been seeing some coverage on BBC News, not United States News, about the tensions that are building right now in Pristina and Kosovo. Is it just a heightening of what's been there all along, or is the situation changed some in the last few months?
The question was to explain a little bit the situation in Kosovo right now, what is happening, because Barbara heard some news from BBC. Well, after 5 years, even before the conflict, I have to give a little bit of information about Albanian chauvinism. But also, I have to be careful here not to kind of, it wouldn't be fair to my friends Albanian that I grew up with. I had also wonderful friends Albanian that are right now also themselves in grave danger because of the Kosovo Liberation Army and the extremists Albanians. Historically, Albanians, if you go 600 years ago, they sided with Turks, with the Ottoman Empire. They were the tax collectors. And they were even more brutal than Turks themselves. And the First World War, again, they sided with Austro-Hungarians. And the Second World War, they sided with the fascists. Now, this time, I don't know how we can call this conflict in Kosovo, they sided with a private market. And one of the biggest crimes of the Serbs, again, I'm going to mention, is just because they did not want to privatize the market. And sometimes people do get a feeling that I am a Milosevic sympathizer. No, I am not. Definitely Milosevic is an evil man. He did hurt my people, the Roma, and I cannot support him, definitely. But he is not the criminal, like a Hitler. He is an evil man, definitely, but he is not a Hitler, for sure. Now the situation in Kosovo right now, after 5 years, the Albanian extremists are calling the United Nations and the NATO's and the US soldiers occupying forces. Isn't that interesting? First you call the people to save you, so-called, and fabrication, and now they want more or less independent Kosovo, which was always the big dream of the hardcore nationalist Albanians, to unify the Kosovo region with Albania. And this is what the State Department very much afraid of. You don't want to create a great Albania, okay? For you not to be confused about Kosovo and Albania. When I'm talking about Kosovo, I'm talking about a region that is part of former Yugoslavia, and it's still officially part of the Serbia. Albania is completely separate state. It does not belong to Kosovo. It's two different countries. And when I mention Albanian from Kosovo, they used to be the Yugoslavian citizens, okay? And the conflict started always, even we are going back in 70s, they wanted to create a greater Albania. And once when they joined the region with Kosovo region with Albania, guess where is going to be the next flashpoint? We are talking maybe a possible war in Macedonia, because they do have 35% of Albanian population in Macedonia. Then you have big population in Greece. So that is what the State Department very much careful and afraid of. So they do want to give Kosovo independent for the Albanians. But in the same time, if you give independent Kosovo to Albanians, that means that you're going to reward them literally for their massive atrocity that they did in the region. And State Department is very careful in the Western Europe about this. So the situation is really intensified this since March, and allegedly, again, another great fabrication of the Albanians. It works, really. Allegedly, you heard in March 16 and 17 and 18th, last month, there were some clashes in between Albanians and Serbs, and supposedly there were 3 kids drowned on the river. which, again, another great fabrication story. But on the newspaper, they quoted, where did they find the sources? Who was the source of the information? And nothing, that doesn't exist. And why should somebody drown in the middle of the spring, even it's still winter there? Come on, you guys. I don't get it. And then there are some vehicles destroyed from the KFOR forces and the United Nations by the extremist Albanians. Just in these recent clashes last month, up to 3,500 people did homes. In one town, there were 250 families lost their homes. And in that incident, one of the Rom actually was arrested by the United Nations soldiers for the illegal possession of weapon. And the people who did destroy more or less 200 homes are free. So another example, great works, this really Western democracy. For you who don't know a little bit about the Romani culture, you know, Roma do tend to consume the marriages at the early stage of the life. People in my culture do get married around 15, 16, 17 years old. So there was a marriage in between, and most of the time the marriage arranged, excuse me. Even though lately it changes, these last 20 years it changed drastically, I would say. But there are still remote places where we do have these traditions, and, you know, and there's a marriage in between a young girl, woman. She was 15 years old, and the guy was 19 years old. So now, the guy is more than 18 years old. And now he is charged with adultery. So this kind of democracy you guys are bringing to me. You see? I mean, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. This is just the hypocrisy of the West. I mean, you know, these are the traditions, and how you're going to go in a devastated region and you're going to impose the law and order? Till today in Kosovo, not a single extremist Albanian was charged with the war crimes. All the Albanian extremist leaders are in freedom, and they're traveling from one country to another. In The Hague, most of the activists, they call it Madeleine Albright's court. It's a joke. It's more or less United States court. It's very ineffective. Most of the time, the Serbs are arrested. The ones that did deserve to be there, that's fine. But very few Croats are there in that court, very few Bosnians, very few Albanians. And what a surprise, all of those extremists are good friends of the State Department. Yes?
I believe you mentioned that your mother has emigrated to Germany. When did she go there, under what circumstances, and where in Germany is she?
That's a good question. So in 1998, December, I went with my family, with Carol and Benjamin, to visit my hometown. And we decided to bring my mother here in the United States. So the clashes were very intense in between Albanians and Serbs. The day before, we needed to go from south of Serbia. Can we head over projector so you can see the region a little bit? I have one small map here, if I can find it. now. Okay, this is the Kosovo region. And I am from the capital of Kosovo, which is Pristina, on your right-hand side, see? So now we have to travel. The night before, there was very intense clashes in Albanians and Serbs. And the next morning, I have to travel with my mother and Carol and my friend, who is a taxi driver, to Belgrade, which is, we are talking about, I don't know, 400 kilometers, more or less 300 miles, close to 300 miles. And we have to cross from Kosovo and to go north into Serbia. And literally, we were the only car on the road to go on that side. It connects Kosovo and Serbia, where are the major clashes. So we went there and we got a visa for my mother to visit us here in California. And then we were planning to have her here for 3 months. So on March 24th, the humanitarian bombing started in Kosovo by the United States. So she could not return back home. And she was with us almost 2 years. And then it was very hard. You know, we were watching the news and you know what I mean, to watch your city, you recognize the neighborhood, it's blown completely with my own tax money, you know. And then after 2 years, she decided she wanted to go to visit my brothers. I have 3 brothers that are refugees in Germany now. And she has a lot of grandchildren there, and she doesn't speak any English, you know. So then it was hard to get her even visa to enter in Europe. She was more or less stuck here.
Where in Germany is she?
Northwestern Germany, Bremen, very close to. Yeah. Questions more? Yes.
I get the kind of distinct impression that you think the United Nations, sorry, I speak for a while. I get the impression that you think the United Nations failed us in Kosovo, or failed you guys in Kosovo. And, you know, if that in fact is the case, you know, if not peacekeepers to bring peace, you know, to a region, you know, then who do you think it can be?
That's a good question. Well, one of my anger, I do have a huge anger at the United Nations, and I don't think that they are the honest brokers, period. Because the Security Council is literally, I would rather call United Nations, it's a really misnomer. It's United Nations of America. So what Uncle Sam says, that's it. Just look at the Security Council. Who are the countries? And historically, if you see, if you go back, I mean, look at what happens in Somalia, in Mogadishu. Huge failure. Look at what happened in Eritrea. Conflict started in 1967. 1967 started the conflict in between Eritreans and Ethiopians. Now, finally, United Nations is bringing some of the displaced people from Sudan into the Eritrea. But you know what happened in these 35 years? I mean, you destroyed complete one generation, and now you want to bring them from one location into another? United Nations is very dysfunctional, very dysfunctional. Most of the time, the UN worker, they have a mandate to work 6 to 8 months, no more. It's a bunch of bureaucrats who just are there for exotic places to go and experience places, and you know, unfortunately, that's the reality. If you want me, I can read you one beautiful poem about the UN. What did you say about the United Nations? Here we go. The title of this poem is just like the book. It's called Not a Refugee. I have a Yugoslav passport, a gypsy told me, but the Serbs won't let me cross the border. They say I have an Albanian last name. The Albanians say I can stay, only Albanians can live in Kosovo. The UN says I am not a refugee because I am still in Kosovo, where I was born. NATO says I can't pick political asylum because no countries want gypsies. During World War II in Europe, in Germany, Jews weren't allowed to stay nor allowed to live. Is that what the world has planned for us? And, you know, there is a Roma, just a refugee that are internally displaced in Kosovo, cannot stand the United Nations. In front of their very own eyes happens the massive destruction.
So what's the solution? I mean, how do you free people, I mean, I hate to use this word, but how do you free them from the diaspora that they find themselves in?
Well, as I mentioned on my speech, we do not have a country. We are not an economical force. We don't have a politician to lobby for us. That's the problem. And this is a problem more or less with almost every oppressed group of people who don't have a country. It has to do a lot with economics, you know. You bomb the infrastructure and then you send Dick Cheney to rebuild the country. Yes?
It's a little bit off topic, but because it's going to be such a big thing near this area, but the Olympics in Greece,
Uh-huh.
and like there's all the talks about security issues, and then, you know, I don't think there's a single country in that area that really likes this. Do you think that the Athens Olympic Games are going to be like a big mistake? Do you see this as something that could provide a lot of terrorist organizations with a big opportunity to, you know, make a statement, so to speak, because they say the Athens airport is this place where all these terrorists go to fly wherever they fly, and people are worried about security, they haven't finished the buildings, et cetera, and it seems it's like right underneath Kosovo in this area, and then it's right next to the Middle East as well. Do you think that, like, this is, it could be a mistake having that?
Well, I don't know about that, but what I know that Kosovo is strategically, for the point of the militaristically, you know, and economically, it's a good strategic region to conquer and to control. And as you can see, it connects the Eastern Europe with Western Europe, and also it connects the minor Asia and going to the Middle East. And it's funny that you're mentioning the Olympics in Greece, because in Athens, it kind of reminds me of the Olympics in Atlanta. The first thing when they needed to rebuild and all this stuff, they just before the Olympics, they cleaned all the homeless people from the Atlanta. But in Athens, they destroyed all the Romani settlement in order to make Athens to look good for the Olympic Games. But I don't know. I think we have to be careful using the word terrorists. Really, it's just, I'm very alert and I don't want to buy that hype. Seriously, I am more frightened from the security guards when I go to travel, which I travel quite frequently. I just returned from Toronto on 20th of March, which is exactly the anniversary of the bombing of Iraq. And I really had a hard time because I fit the profile. So, I don't know, for me, this more scares me than, and the people who are on the TV, who are telling me because I need to be safe, I have to spend $430 billion for Homeland Security. Yes.
It's my understanding that there is a significant pipeline going through this region of the world. If that's true, can you sort of give us an idea where it lies on that map?
Well, if you go a little bit more north, you are getting to the Caspian Sea. And, you know, Europe, the gas is much expensive. You pay for 1 liter somewhere around €2 now. You're in €1 and something for 1 liter, which is 1 gallon is 3.7 liters. Now you do the math. So, you know, it is, we are living in scary times, really, folks. It's just, that's why I said, I answered to the to young gentleman about the United Nations, because most of the funds that are provided to United Nations is through the USAID. You know, if I'm going to give you money, then you better get with my agenda. So that's why I'm saying it's not honest broker. There is not solution. I don't know what is the solution, but we have kind of to bring these points out because it bugs me when people blindly just say, oh, Doctors Without Borders or Red Cross. It's just, they take thousands of dollars. The heads organization are taking thousands of dollars. That is not humanitarian work. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen.
This is a difficult question, but when the war in Kosovo began, clearly the West, including NATO and Western Europe, was on the side of the Albanians.
Yes.
And what we heard about the Serbs was extremely negative. And then NATO went into bomb and destroy much of Serbia. But what you've been saying is that it was more the Albanians who have been very prejudiced and discriminatory in their acts against the Roma. And so, and I know on KPFA they generally speak a lot more positively, and so does former Ramsey Clark,
Yes.
about the Serbs. How do you feel about that? How do you, I know this is a complicated question, but I've always only heard the Albanian side.
Okay, this is a great question. Here, as a Rom, I am discriminated, definitely, by the Serbs. There is some prejudices. No some, I would say quite a bit. But if I'm going to face Albanian, then burnt alive. So that's the difference. Now, before the war break up in Kosovo, the Serbian government gave the rights to Albanians that they could have in the Kosovo region. We are talking about more or less 2 million people. A minority group in a country, in Yugoslavia, has 2 TV stations in Albanian language. More than 20 radio stations in Albanian language. You could be a doctor, engineer, lawyer in Albanian universities. You have up to 2,300,000 publications in Albanian language. You have 2 daily newspapers in Albanian language. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to ask you, which ethnic group in the United States of America has those privileges? As you can see, we are even trying to cut the bilingual education. I mean, come on. You heard just recently, a few years ago, it was a huge fuss about the Ebonics. But if we are going to introduce to our classroom Shakespearean language, nobody's going to object, is that right? Yes or no? Okay. So, you know, Yugoslavia did produce one of the highest level of educated Roma. I do have masters in chemistry. So, you know, there are doctors, lawyers in Yugoslavia, and Yugoslavia was a very successful independent country. Did not belong to East Bloc, did not belong to NATO. And that was a big problem. And after the collapse of the communist countries, the only remaining socialistic country in Europe was Yugoslavia, and it had to be destroyed, period. And if you see every single leader, from the Bosnian Prime Minister, Izetbegovic, Mr. Izetbegovic, he was a fascist collaborator. He was almost 30 years in prison. Franjo Tudjman, the Prime Minister of Croatia, who openly denied that Holocaust ever existed. Big Nazi sympathizer. As a matter of fact, his book in Croatia was one of the bestsellers prior to the breakup of Yugoslavia. And those are very good friends of the State Department, too. Question?
Knowing both sides of the story, would you describe CNN or similar news broadcasting organizations as propaganda? Or is there some value in watching and receiving that information?
In the United States? Yeah. Well, usually I read Guardian from UK. I receive weekly Guardian. And I don't know, BBC is okay. KPFA is great. There is very little.
Necessarily mainstream to the general public. Like I'm talking about CNN and MSNBC and Fox and corporate news.
They're all in bed with Pentagon. I can give you some websites, you know, you can check it out. So, one of the interesting story, I do bring quite often Christian poor. So, she went in Kosovo and did some horrible coverages. And you remember all those images of the poor Albanian refugees, and they were putting women and children holding, and they're fleeing from vicious Serbs. You remember that?
Penny Marshall? The Penny Marshall stuff?
Penny Marshall, thank you. But also there was a Christina Amanpour. Literally, it was all staged because Roma were fleeing the bombs. Actually, what was happening, most of those Albanians were fleeing the bombing of the United States and NATO. And there were also the Arkansas Tigers, which are the ultra-nationalist Serbs. I mean, ugly. It is literally a civil war. So now, how you can tell? But what was so interesting, the refugees, I am still in touch with them for all these years. And they were telling that they were literally bringing the women and the children behind the forest so they can put all the mud on themselves, and then they would show up on the main road and showing like, oh, poor Albanians. Look at the new Hitler's Europe. It was all fabricated. Now, if you have a sweetheart relationship in between CNN and the State Department, what kind of news you're going to get? No, you didn't understand me. Okay, let me explain to you. Do you know to who Christina Amanpour is married? Anybody knows, heard of Jamie Rubin, State Department spokesperson, Clinton era? So they're married. So that's why I say, what kind of news you're going to get when you have a sweetheart relationship in between CNN and State Department? Now we don't have those relationship anymore, okay, but we are having in bed our journalists. So, question? Yes, Barbara, sorry.
I know that you have some information from Voice of Roma with you. Could you let us know how we might get some of the information you've brought?
Well, if you want to take a look on those books, unfortunately there are only 2 left. And I know the books are 15, the poetry books are 10. And we do have some articles, please feel free to grab them. And if you want to get engaged with Voice of Roma to be an intern, we do need some help. I know most of our work is almost 100% volunteer. We just have the budget for our office cost, and I guess more or less that is it.